We're going to talk more about emotions and how valuable they are and how they can be collected and some of the fun little ways that they can be collected with those expensive devices you buy, like watches and headphones and cell phones for that matter. So stay tuned because hopefully your mind is going to be blown. You're watching Big Tech, and we are on episode 72. Notes are out in YouTube chat. If you're not on YouTube, you can go to PATRIOT'S.com. Go to the shows tab, look for the banner that says Big Tech, find the section that says read, watch, think for yourself, and you will find the archive notes there. Like I said, we're on episode 72. We're going to look at another marketing company, Effectiva is their name, originated from a person who went to MIT in their media labs, and they then started this marketing company called Effectiva. And then we're going to look at galvanic skin response and why that matters. And I'll tell you briefly now, it's because things like a smartwatch and headphones do things that extract your emotions. And one of those things is the measurement of your skin conductivity, which is a galvanic skin response. They also use light, PPG sensor, to extract your heart rate. And we're going to look at Freer Logic because they are able to extract your brain waves with the extracted heartbeat signal. So stay tuned, and off we go. Effectiva, human perception AI, analyzes complex human states. And they primarily deal with facial analysis and voice recognition, but they say and mention in their patents, which we'll look at, that they can utilize other sensors. And it doesn't matter at this point what the sensors are. The sensor platforms are ubiquitous, and those sensor platforms are mobile devices and wearables. At least that's what the common sensor platforms are. We haven't yet revisited the nanotechnology piece, but we will when time permits. For now, this is what we're going to stay with. We're going to stay with wearables, mobile devices, and the commercial telecommunications networks. So using computer vision, speech analytics, deep learning, and a lot of data can analyze human states and context. In-cabin sensing for a car redefines the occupant experience and improve road safety, right? So studying your behavior while you're in your vehicle, connected cars, collect insight into unfiltered consumer responses to ads, videos, and TV programming. There's an iPad or a tablet here. It doesn't stop with these categories, ads, videos, and TV programming. If this device is near you, it's everything that you're doing. And we have our devices around us all the time. This is the lady. She's the former MIT Effectiva CEO and co-founder, Rana Ilkali-Boy's book on humanizing technology with emotion AI. Emotion AI. So, out of MIT, this is Effectiva, same place. Out of MIT, we spun out of MIT Media Lab in 2009 and are backed by leading investors, including Kleiner Perkins, Calfield Byers, Horizon Ventures, Phoenix Venture Capital, and WPP. Founded by visionary scientists, that girl Rana, and Rosalind Picard, who co-founded Effectiva. They're the pioneers of Effectiva computing. Rana is Effectiva CEO, and Rosaline heads up the Effectiva computing group at MIT Media Lab. And what you see here is her face. Looks like the camera here on this mobile device, looks like a tablet, is looking at her face and analyzing various components of the face to understand that she's smiling, and then obviously extrapolating whatever her emotional state is. So we're going to look at what this means in a general sense and move on. And the idea here is surveillance, folks. When they want to understand how you respond to your environment, how you interact, how you feel, what makes you tick, what turns you on, what makes you nauseous, what makes you angry, what makes you euphorically happy, what frustrates you, what is it that makes you tick as a human, has everything to do with your emotional state. We are emotional creatures. That is what makes us human. So used by 25% of Fortune Global 500 and 1,400 plus brands, leading market research firms like Millward, Brown, LRW, Added Value, and Unruly, brands like Mars, Kellogg's, and CBS use our technology to measure consumer emotion responses to digital content such as ads and TV programming. Powering apps in a digital experience with an emotion layer, our emotion AI is used in gaming, automotive, robotics, education, healthcare, experiential marketing, retail, human resources, meaning how do you feel about your boss and your coworkers, video communication, and more. Video communication. Now let's think about that for a minute. Everybody's quarantined, forced to communicate over platforms like Zoom or other similar type platforms, Skype, FaceTime, Hangouts, you name it. Video chat, you could say in general. This type of technology is able to analyze and engage, or I should say gauge, what your response is, how you feel about whatever it is that's going on. You could be saying one thing, but really be feeling something else. And these are your biometrics, folks. This is your information, your biometrics. Information about you that is personal, that's profitable, that makes you vulnerable. And in my view, this is Fourth Amendment stuff. Your privacy. Your privacy. What does privacy look like in modern day society? What does privacy look like over the internet? What does privacy look like with the use and implementation of modern telecommunications? What is privacy? Affectiva. Personal emotional profile generation. The mental state of an individual is obtained in order to generate an emotional profile for the individual. The individual's mental state is derived from an analysis of the individual's facial and physiological information. The individual's mental state is derived from an analysis of the individual's facial and physiological information. The emotional profile of other individuals is correlated to the first individual for comparison. So you're compared and contrasted to others who are involved in viewing or experienced a similar thing that you're being measured, or that you're experiencing while being measured. Various categories of emotional profiles are defined based upon correlation. The emotional profile of the individual or group of individuals is rendered for display, used to provide feedback, and to recommend activities for the individual, or to provide information about the individual. Telemedicine, that's right. All of these concepts fuse in with telemedicine, whereby your social score will be evaluated remotely using these kinds of technologies to determine whether or not you're a good little global citizen. An individual's emotions are an important component to who they are. A person's response to stimuli can have a profound impact on the mental states they experience. The mental state of an individual can run a broad gamut from happiness to sadness, from contentedness to worry, from excited to calm. These mental states are experienced in response to everyday events such as frustration during a traffic jam, boredom while standing in line, and impatience while waiting for a cup of coffee. Individuals who are able to understand their emotional states have the option to use the information to accommodate their current abilities or limitations. Many mental states, such as frustration, confusion, disappointment, boredom, disgust, and delight, can be identified and related to behavioral patterns. When confronted with unpleasant mental states, the individuals can respond with cravings for pleasure, comfort, reward, or enjoyment. On perhaps an even more visible scale, individuals can often be observed evidencing a collective emotional response, such as responding with fear and anxiety after witnessing a catastrophe, or responding with happy enthusiasm when their sports team obtains a victory. When an individual is aware of his or her mental states, he or she is better equipped to realize his or her own abilities, cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively and fruitfully, and make contributions to his or her community. Analysis of mental states can be performed to develop a mental state profile, a profile of your mental state. For an individual or a group of individuals, the mental state can include emotional states, cognitive states, and/or physiological states. Example mental states include frustration, concentration, confusion, disappointment, hesitation, cognitive overload, focusing, engagement, attention, boredom, exploration, confidence, trust, delight, disgust, skepticism, doubt, satisfaction, excitement, laughter, calmness, stress, happiness, sadness, smiling, frowning, curiosity, and numerous others. Mental state profile information can be used to display patterns and norms for the individual or a group, and can aid in understanding consumer behavior, tailoring products to closer match a user's desires, and improving websites and interfaces to computer programs. How about winning elections? How about campaigns? It's just one big, long, protracted advertisement, is it not? A political campaign? An election cycle? A computer-implemented method for mental state analysis is disclosed, comprising obtaining mental state data from an individual, analyzing the mental state data to produce mental state information, correlating the mental state information of the individual with mental state information from many people, comparing and contrasting one to a group, or a group to a group. Interesting when you think about how this information can be used. And categorizing the individual, with others from the plurality of people based on the correlating. So what you're doing is you're putting people in boxes, you're putting people in categories, putting them into demographics. Some would call that racist. But it's not. It's an overused term. It has nothing to do with race. I say that euphemistically, sarcastically, or to illustrate just exactly what is being attempted to be quantified with statements like, oh, you're being racist. When in fact, most of the time when that statement is used, it has nothing to do with it. What this is illustrating is that there is technology that exists that is able to understand who you are as a person, what makes you tick, and then categorize you based on your unintentional, unnoticeable, subtle, subliminal responses that are being measured through things like a camera and through electrodes that are placed onto your body voluntarily, and or wirelessly with no contact, which we will get to this show or the next. This is your information. This is your privacy. And it's being extracted, and you are being exploited. People exhibit and communicate a wide range of emotions in their daily lives. These emotional states are experienced in response to everyday events. Just think about wearing a watch or wearing headphones all day long. I want you to keep that picture in your mind. How many people do you see wearing a smartwatch, carrying a cell phone within 1 foot of their body, or wearing headphones? How many people? Damn near everybody. 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 These emotional states are experienced in response to everyday events, and when identified as a pattern, can create an emotional identity associated with a particular person or a group of people. Changes in the emotional state of an individual can occur quickly and might not be easily recognized by the individual, often resulting in situations where the individual has difficulty summarizing and describing his or her emotional state. Providing an assessment of an emotional state can assist the individual with decision-making, activity selection, activity scheduling, and other tasks. When the assessment describes an emotional characteristic or pattern, the data can allow useful analysis and tailoring of material for the person or a group of people. This is for marketing purposes. Obviously, this is written as if it could be an app for you. If you have a smartwatch and your watch may notify you when you're stressed or when it thinks you're tired. That's the kind of things that they're referring to in that paragraph here. This stuff is being actively collected on a regular basis and being stored and cataloged in your own personal little profile, your biometric database, stored in the cloud by companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and Apple and others. To this end, a personal emotional profile, which includes a summary or analysis of data representing a person's distinctive features or characteristics, can be created. A summary or an analysis, aka a profile or a dossier, can be created, consisting of a person's distinctive features or characteristics as it relates to your emotional profile. These characteristics can include the emotional state of an individual at a moment in time or over a period of time. The profile can include distinctive habits, attitudes, qualities, behaviors, and emotional traits of an individual or a group of individuals. The profile can provide the individual or group of individuals with perspective and insight about their general emotional characteristics or their emotional state in response to certain activities or behaviors. What would China do with this kind of technology? What would the woke community do if they were in charge with this kind of technology? What is that going to look like when HARPA or the health department is going to legally be able to use these kinds of technologies to establish whether or not you're mentally fit to be part of society? Because these technologies exist and they are already proliferated. They already are in use. And we are moving into a medical-based system that is remote, aka telemedicine, that's being done on purpose. And that's going to give more authority to AI and software to evaluate your well-being, most of which will be in the category of your mental health. Because we're a woke, quote unquote, woke society. The profile can provide the individual or group of individuals with perspective and insights about their general emotional characteristics or their emotional state in response to certain activities or behaviors. In addition, the profile can be used to track reactions of a person or people to certain stimuli. For instance, in a certain embodiment, the profile identifies the number of times a person has laughed during a certain time period, providing a way to track the responsiveness of the person to humor. That's just one example. Such laugh tracking could be used to identify receptiveness to general or specific types of humor. Do you like dirty humor? Do you like clean humor? Or to provide the individual with information when certain milestones are reached during the day, like 10,000 laughs, for example. Just one example. How many times do you yell? How many times do you yawn? How many times do you sigh? How many times do you groan? Because the example, just one, the example is laughing and humor. So it's nice and cute and fluffy when they're explaining the general idea of how this software and AI works. Additionally, emotional response tracking can be used to gauge and analyze readiness to react to emotional scenes in media. In some cases, certain reactions could be incentivized. For example, game points can be earned and stored within a profile based on certain emotional responses. That's interesting. Some examples of such incentivizing could include giving points to a first individual to laugh when exposed to a certain joke, or to the first individual to evidence emotional distress when exposed to a distressing situation. How's that for social conditioning? The first one to give us a real emotional response that we're looking for gets cryptocurrency. And if you don't give us the response, we could potentially take resources away from you. Hashtag social credit score. Other types of scoring could likewise be analyzed and recorded as part of the emotional profile. Analysis of an individual's emotional state can be used to provide feedback to the individual about the status of his or her well-being. Are you a good global citizen? The feedback can be used to create a personal emotional profile of the individual. The emotional states of a plurality of individuals, many individuals, can be correlated and compared to a predefined group of individuals. Various attributes can be associated and used to define categories of individuals with similar emotional profiles. The deplorables. What could be done with this technology, folks? What can be done with this technology if all of a sudden a group in power wanted to persecute an opposing belief system? An opposing belief system. It goes far beyond speech at that point, because these types of categories, this type of classification is done by measuring your subconscious or unconscious reaction to stimuli. And it's done with wireless technology, tablets, phones, laptops, Wi-Fi routers, radar chips, and wearable technologies like watches and headphones, which we'll get to in a moment. Various attributes can be associated and used to define categories of individuals with similar emotional profiles. The analysis can take place on a computer with which the user is interacting. Profile information can be combined with additional information about the individual, such as demographic information, to create a more comprehensive outline and summary of the emotional state of the individual. A category from an emotional profile can be used to further enhance the demographic profile. The profile can be used to extrapolate behavior, predict future reactions to certain events, or inform a social profile of the individual. I'll read that one again because that's kind of important. The profile can be used to extrapolate behavior, which is to predict behavior, to predict future reactions to certain events. That kind of sounds like Shadowgate a little bit. It also kind of sounds like the Arab Spring, where they used Twitter to agitate an entire society into uprising, which you could also argue that's currently being done in the United States. The profile can be used to extrapolate behavior, predict future reactions to certain events, or inform a social profile of an individual. Inform a social profile of an individual. At what point are your thoughts going to be illegal? At what point are certain thoughts going to be criminal? This personal emotional profile can be used to make recommendations for different activities. It can include recommendations for activity performance based upon time of day, period of time during a day, or a calendar-based scheduling. The profile can also be included in an aggregated analysis along with a plurality of people's emotional profiles, allowing for activity recommendations. Personal emotional profile can be developed by evaluating facial expressions, hand gestures, and physiological conditions exhibited by an individual. For example, the human face is a powerful channel for communicating a wide variety of emotional states. The general expressiveness of an individual as they view input stimuli can be analyzed to determine an emotional state. A camera or another facial recognition device can be used to capture images of an individual's face, and software can be used to extract and interpret laughs, smiles, frowns, and other facial expressions to aid in creating an emotional profile. Other physiological data can also be useful in determining the personal emotional profile of an individual. Gestures, eye movement, sweating, electrodermal activity, or galvanic skin response. The electrical conductivity of your skin. Heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration are a few examples of such potentially useful data sources, and we've covered heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, and to some extent electrodermal activity when we looked at Google's radar technology, being able to measure the moisture and sweat content on the skin, as well as the temperature in multiple locations, for example, on an arm. And we looked at Wi-Fi, and we looked at different chipsets that are able to measure heart rate and respiration, and by extension, blood pressure, using wireless signals. And we looked at cameras being able to do those very things, as well as read brainwave state by looking at the blood flow characteristics, the thermal characteristics in the forehead and the sinus cavity. So we've covered all of this at a high level, and we're going to continue to do so because these are the mechanisms by which your information is being collected, with or without your consent, with or without your speech. A variety of sensor types can be used to capture physiological data, including heart rate monitors, blood pressure monitors, electrodermal activity sensors, galvanic skin response. We're going to get into those tonight. Or other types of sensors. A camera can be useful for simultaneously capturing physiological data and facial images. Sensors coupled to a computer in some embodiments, the same computer with which a user is interacting. In other embodiments, one or more other computers can be configured to detect, capture, and measure one or more external manifestations of the user's emotional state. For example, a still camera can be configured to capture images of the user's face. A video camera can be configured to capture images of the user's movements. A heart rate monitor can be configured to capture and measure a user's heart rate. A skin resistance sensor can be configured to detect changes in the user's galvanic skin response. An accelerometer, which is in your phone and in watches, can be configured to measure such movements as gestures, foot tapping, or head tilts, to name a few. In embodiments, multiple sensors to capture the user's emotional state data are included, so they can fuse all of these sensors together to create a more robust, more accurate profile of how you feel. Okay, I think we've got enough of this covered. So this is one patent from Affectiva, company that spun out of MIT's Media Lab. The next one we're going to look at briefly, and we're not going to look too far into it. Determining the intensity of a biological response to a presentation. This is a Nielsen patent, the other marketing company that we looked at, who partners with Twitter, Google, Microsoft, Apple, I believe. Yeah, there's good applications to this technology. There really is. Telemedicine could literally displace pharmaceutical companies. It is going to displace pharmaceutical companies. So we're going to get into the medical applications of what this can do. We need to understand not what I call, but what I have learned is being called a closed loop system. What that is, stimulus is provided, and then a measurement to the response to that stimulus is collected. And based on the collection of that information, the collection of the response to the stimulus that's being provided is either continued to be provided, it's changed a little bit to get the response that they're looking for, or if the response is at its finish point, then they stop delivering stimulus. It's a closed loop system. Observe, orient, decide, act, and OODA loop for all you Marine Corps folks out there. Observe, orient, decide, and act. A closed loop system whereby something like a cell phone or a personal area network or a local area network is able to understand what is happening when stimuli is being provided to you, measure their change or the response to that stimuli, and then make adjustments to the stimuli, and then provide an adjusted stimuli to you, and then measure the response again over and over and over and over and over. And when we start looking at things like electromedicine and things like ultrasound and the way that it can impact biology, magnetic fields, electric fields, ultrasound, and light. When we look at how those things interact with the human organism, and then we combine that with the fact that something like a cell phone possesses all of the platform sensor capabilities to send and receive stimuli and or read the response to that stimuli, we will put the pieces together in order to illustrate that something like a cell phone possesses the capability to displace medicine or to augment or supplement medicine. And if it's that powerful of a platform, why in the hell is something like the internet not regulated in a similar fashion to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? Why is it not looked at, coveted, and respected to the extent or similar to something analogous to the Hippocratic Oath, if in fact the future of medicine is going to potentially be delivered through these devices? Those discussions are not happening. Congress is still asking Facebook for crying out loud whether or not they're using cookies to track their users. And we're at the point where there are sensors and antennas and energy delivery mechanisms like lasers on your phone and coil antennas on your phone and LED screens that can pulse on your phone that are able to interact with your physiology and your biology, up to and including potentially modifying your DNA or modifying the epigenetic output of your DNA, modifying protein folds as your cells are doing things like recreating new cells or creating cellular communication mechanisms. This is where we're at with medicine, science, and technology. And these discussions are not happening, at least not in the public space. And it's disgusting to watch Congress. It's embarrassing to watch Congress ask the CEO of Facebook, for example, if they're still tracking their users with cookies. It demonstrates the general ignorance at that level of government and the overarching power and existential threat, in my view, that big tech and big telecom have as it relates to interfering with the free exercise of self-government, particularly in the United States. And from a species perspective, this idea of free will, from a species perspective, interacting with the biological organism to the extent that you are creating closed loop systems that can stimulate the organism and override natural impulses and override natural cellular function, is a raping of the species and directly conflicts with fundamental physical cosmic law. For a human, it is to exercise free will. Let's get back to what we're talking about over here. Determining the intensity of a biological response to a presentation. This patent talks about a galvanic skin response, measuring the sweat and salt content on the skin in order to understand a peak response and a trough response, right? So a excited response and a not so excited response, and then measuring that out to understand the effectiveness of stimuli in an environment that somebody is experiencing. So I have a note here, and I'm going to look for this. Example techniques disclosed in this patent describe a connection with galvanic skin response data. Additionally, or alternatively, the examples disclosed herein may likewise be applied to other types of biological responses, which is what they're saying here. What they're saying here is that this is not exclusive to galvanic skin response. This is just simply an example. And what this patent encompasses is software that is able to understand peak response to stimuli and a no response to stimuli. And what it says here, additionally or alternatively, examples disclosed within this patent likewise can be applied to other types of biological responses, such as heart rate, respiration state, body motion, eye tracking, functional magnetic resonance imaging, electroencephalography, electrocardiograms, pupillary dilation, electrooculography, facial emotional encoding, reaction time, or any other biologically based responses. So what this means is any which way they can understand a biologic or a physiologic response, right? Any type of conscious or subconscious biologic response that can be measured is able to be quantified and categorized and then associated with some type of an emotional or physiological profile as it relates to the way that you respond to your environment. So we are the science experiment, I think is what I'm saying to you. And that the world at this point has been opened up to some extent to being a giant science experiment. And what we're looking at this point is being able to read and understand the response to stimuli, whatever that stimuli is. And at this point, common understanding of stimuli is I watch a commercial or I watch a movie or I see an advertisement or I interact with my family or I interact at my job. If I have a camera and a microphone present, then it's possible for companies to understand what my emotional response is to any of those things I just mentioned. From a camera and a microphone. Facial recognition is just now becoming mainstream as it relates to the power of facial recognition. Microphone, voice analytics, actual words and comments and statements that you make, these are considered valid and factual at this point in a legal basis. And what I'm attempting to illustrate to you over a sequence of months at this point is that these concepts reach far beyond simply the words you speak and the faces that you make on a camera. It has to do with these subtle, nuanced
unconscious variations in your nervous system that then create some type of a physical change that a sensor can measure. The body and brain measuring conductance responses to understand the emotional experience. We are not going to read this. But what I want to show you here is this document talks about skin conductance responses, galvanic skin responses, electrodermal activity, emotions, fear conditioning, anxiety, stress, and decision making. These types of things can be measured and analyzed. And what I want to show you here, I encourage you to read this document. It's in the show notes. You can search for it if you want online. It's free. Sweat glands and the brain. There's a functional and structural relationship of sweat glands with specific parts of the human brain. The central brain area controlling these vegetative functions or processes that are related to the maintenance of life is the hypothalamus. The relationship has been clearly demonstrated by electrically stimulating specific hypothalamic areas, which is typically followed by a sympathetic response, including vasoconstriction and sweat secretion. And there have been studies that show this. The hypothalamus is further influenced by the collection of brain structures called the limbic system, as well as the frontal lobe areas. The frontal lobe area would be something that can be measured with a camera and potentially stimulated with the infrared lasers that are used to log you into your phone, because infrared passes through skin and bone and tissue. And we will look more at that when we start studying light. The inclusion of the limbic system, especially the amygdala, are an area involved in emotions. So the limbic system ties in to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus ties in to the sweat glands. And we're talking about electrodermal activity, galvanic skin response, which is measuring the skin conductivity of the skin, which has everything to do with the salt content and the hydration, the amount of sweat or fluid in your skin that changes the electrical properties of the skin. And what they're talking about in this section of this paper is that this is directly correlated with the deep areas of the brain that are associated with the vegetative state. So the things that happen even if you're in a coma or asleep, things like breathing, your heart rate, sweating, because that has to do with regulating the body's temperature, all the things that happen when you don't have to think about subconsciously, part of the autonomic nervous system. So the hypothalamus and the limbic system, which is responsible for emotion, ties directly in to the hypothalamus. And it talks about the hippocampus, an adjacent area associated with the formation of memories, also being involved with the hypothalamus. Allows neuroscientists to map from anatomy to function and eventually cognition. So what I'm getting at here is they're able to, with complex machine learning through trial and error and studying, they're able to understand simply by measuring your skin a great deal about you beyond your emotions, looking at your skin, measuring your skin. I wanted to show you something else in here, and we will move on. We are almost 45 minutes in. This is a figure that they use in this paper. A general simplistic example of conditioning. Right? You're represented by the light gray, right? So you're carrying the briefcase. First encounter with the boss, dark gray. There's no stressful events. Thus, every time you think of your boss, the physiologic response is unaffected. Imagine that now an encounter with your boss is often followed by a request to work during the weekend. The outcome is that every time you think of your boss, you subsequently think of having to work during the weekend, which makes you stressed. After some repetitions, the mere thinking of or exposure to the image of your boss will generate a physiological response, even without any request to work a weekend. That is what this is showing you. And the reason I share this with you is because this is the kind of stuff that corporations would like to know about worker satisfaction, worker loyalty, and all of those other associated factors that a company will be looking at to determine their effectiveness as leaders and the effectiveness of their employees as it relates to productivity and efficiency, ultimately impacting their bottom line, their profitability. Now, if you didn't have any workers' right protections, what's stopping a company from using these types of technologies, especially with this distance working stuff, to use your emotional profile to determine your employability, your viability as an employee? If you don't like your company, regardless of how good you are at your job, that may be enough where you are no longer employed. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's legal? And if it is legal, should it be legal? Because ultimately, this is a violation of your privacy, is it not? Are your thoughts private? If you don't openly display disdain, causing disruption at your job, should your personal feelings about what an asshole your boss is have anything to do with your employability? How many people really even like their boss? Anyway, I hope you get the point. Let's move on. A biometric monitoring device with a heart rate measurement activity. This is a Fitbit patent. We're not going to read too much of it. You understand what a smartwatch is. You know that they extract things like your heartbeat. They also can extract things like your galvanic skin response. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. In this patent, it says, biometric monitoring devices include a protrusion or on the skin or interior side of the device, so the face down side of the device, the part that touches your skin. When contacting the user, the protrusion engages with the skin with more force than the surrounding device body. In this embodiment, an optical window or light transmissive structure may form or be incorporated in the portion of the protrusion. Light emitters or detectors of the optical sensors may be disposed or arranged at the protrusion, juxtaposed the window or a light transmissive structure. As such, when attached to the user's body, the window portion of the protrusion of the biometric monitoring device engages with the user's skin with more force than the surrounding device body. What they're saying here is that basically that this creates a secure physical connection so that you have a stable connection that can then be useful to take measurements from the user. The protrusion improves sustained contact between the biometric monitoring device and the user's skin, which may reduce the amount of stray light measured. The photodetector decreased motion between the biometric monitoring device and the user to provide improved local pressure in the user's skin, all of which may increase the quality of the cardiac signal. The heartbeat gets better. If we get that far tonight, it gets better. We're going to talk about the heart and what can be learned from the heart. Notably, the protrusion may contain other sensors that benefit from close proximity and or secure contact of the user's skin. These may be included in addition to or in lieu of a heart rate sensor and include sensors such as skin temperature sensor, right? A pulse oximeter, blood pressure sensor, an electromyograph sensor, EMG sensor, or galvanic skin response sensor, which are electrodes that touch the skin. Same thing here in this one. This is another Fitbit patent. I'll show you the patent first so you can see. These are in the show notes, but nonetheless, if you're just watching, it's a wearable heart rate monitor from Fitbit. It's another patent that they have that has subtle variations to this kind of technology. Biometric monitoring device of this disclosure may also include a galvanic skin response circuitry to measure the response of a user's skin to emotional and physical stimuli or physiological changes, transition of a sleep stage, for example. Those of you that are familiar with smartwatches, all those health functions that are in those health apps, these are the kinds of things that they actually are using to measure your body to provide you that information. But what I'm getting at here is that a lot of additional information beyond what you have access to is also potentially, an asterisk, potentially, even though I pretty much can guarantee you it's being done, being extracted from you and cataloged and categorized so that you and people like you can be monetized, and will continue. We're going to get back to this device, a dual EEG no contact monitor with personal EEG monitor for concurrent brain monitoring and communication in the form of a watch. Let me refresh this because I think I added a picture and I want to show you that there's an actual working device. So this is from Freer Logic. This is a working device in a form factor of a watch that is able to transmit your thoughts over the internet or Wi-Fi to have synthetic telepathic discussions in addition to measuring your emotional response. And it uses these little electrodes, the electrodes on the back of the watch that touches the skin, to be able to send thoughts into and out of the brain. It also uses a coil, which we're gonna look at coil antennas in detail over the next few shows, to do things like send transcranial magnetic pulses to somebody else's brain or to the wearer's brain. And these pulses then can be read by the watch to then interpret emotional states and other things out of an individual's brain who's not wearing the watch, to then be transmitted through the skin of the individual wearing this device, whereby this individual can literally read the brain activity of another individual with this device. And you can look up Freer Logic for yourself. It's bookmarked on humaninternet.org because their sensors are going in a lot of places. Body-based wearable neurobiomonitor, and we are going to get there hopefully tonight to show you in some detail exactly what they're able to extract from something like a Fitbit or an Apple smartwatch. Before we get there, I want to show you, this is your standard Apple smartwatch, right? Apple smartwatch. We're going to scroll through these pictures here real quick. It's got optical sensors and it's got electrical sensors. Here's the patent. Apple, wearable electronic device with electrodes for sensing biological parameters. And it's pretty plain. This is one design of many that they have. Electrodes around the outside, optical sensor on the inside, and you can see the open windows here. It's hard to see with the shiny light. So with the light not on, you can see these windows here to receive the reflected light, to measure your heart rate, and to also measure your heart rate and get other information off of your skin with these electrodes. It says in this patent that the electrodes are deposited onto an exterior surface of the carrier. It discusses in this patent that the housing, the bezeling itself, not even the electrodes that are necessarily on the sensor platform right here, but the bezeling itself can be a conductive structure that is a sensor, And even the buttons can be conductive, whereby when you touch them with your hands, it can take measurements. It doesn't matter what phone you got, buddy. The phones are pretty much universally the same. We're going to look at if we have time today, if not on Sunday or Monday, we're going to look at antennas on a phone that deal with proximity sensing that literally make you part of the circuit and can sense information from you. But we have to get through the body-based sensing of brain activity first before I can illustrate to you how a phone can, quote unquote, potentially extract your brain waves literally just by touching or being near your phone. It's pulling your brain waves. And it can do it in a variety of ways. We'll go through them one by one, piece by piece. So rather than read through all of this, I'm going to highlight some of the things that I've already highlighted. I encourage you to go to humaninternet.org and look at this stuff. I'm doing everything I can to put as much of this stuff as I can in one place, humaninternet.org, in a way that allows people to review this information and you can come up to whatever conclusions you want. But as time goes on, this site will grow. And as time goes on, as my skills improve, I will make shorter videos that illustrate what I think's happening. But we're not there yet. We're still doing 2-hour discussions here at PSB. And I'm completely happy with this venue, if you will. So here we go. Wearable electronic devices, other timekeeping devices, other health monitoring or fitness devices, other portable computing devices, mobile phones, including smartphones, tablet computing devices, digital media players, or the like. Other electronic devices that may incorporate a set of electrodes. Electrodes don't mean they have to be electrically conductive on your skin. We will look at capacitive electrodes, capacitive sensors. The screen of your phone uses capacitive sensing technology. There are antennas in your phone, like a near field communications antenna, that uses capacitive field technology for proximity sensing that literally makes you part of the circuit. So when they talk about electronic devices that may incorporate a set of electrodes, electrodes can also be antennas or capacitive sensors, whereby there's something that's non-conductive in between you and the electrode, which allows for an electric field to be generated. And then your body and the condition of your skin changes the field characteristics, and that in turn changes the voltage that's read from the different plates that are used to make the capacitive field, positive and a negative, with your skin or your body in between or within that field, it changes the voltage. And so if they can precisely measure these electric fields, then they can start determining and understanding what's going on with your body. We'll get there. At this point, we're looking at contact electrodes and light because it's pretty dang obvious what this stuff is. We all, at this point, understand what a smartwatch is and the fact that it collects something about what's going on with you. So we'll start here and we'll walk our way towards the invisible to illustrate that these concepts are possible at distance, miles potentially away from you. But I can't just tell you that and expect you to have some element of believability or some component of acknowledgement that this is possible. So we're going to go piece by piece. It talks about vapor depositing. And why I want to illustrate this to you is because when we start looking at headphones, you'll see exactly where this technology is possible. In some embodiments, 1 or 2 thin film electrodes may be PVD deposited on an exterior surface of a structure that forms part of a housing of an electronic device. It may be transparent. It may be semi-transparent. It may be translucent. It may be opaque. Maybe or an opaque surface made out of an amorphous solid, glass, or crystalline material, such as sapphire or zirconia, plastic, or the like. In the case of a watch, a type of electronic device, an additional electrode may be positioned on a user rotatable crown of a watch or a button of the watch body or another surface of the housing that defines the watch body. So this talks about what I was telling you a minute ago, where anything that's conductive on that watch can function as an electrode, can function as a way to provide voltage that can be measured if and when you touch it or if you're around it. And what I want to illustrate for you is this PVD, that they can spray atomic layers of conductive material that you may be able to see or not see and use those as conductive surfaces. Now, why is that important? We're going to jump ahead here real quick and look at earphones, because when we look at things like these AirPods, these little guys right here, these AirPods, so sleek and sexy, and everybody wears them because they're so cool and they're such good sound. Don't have any of those stupid cords, not getting in the way. Well, they're covered in electrodes, folks. They're covered in electrodes and they're invisible. You see any electrodes on those things? I see a sleek, sexy, shiny, reflective surface. Do you see any electrodes? I don't, but they're there. And those of you that use these things understand that you can touch, stroke, rub, whatever, to skip a song, play a song, pause a song, turn up the volume, turn down the volume. How do you think you're able to do that? It gets better because these things can provide stimuli to your ear. Let's jump around for a minute. This is not an Apple patent, but what it does illustrate for you is that they're wearable earpieces, multifactorial biometric analysis system and method, right? So this thing is talks about an earpiece that collects your biometrics. I'm going to show you that in this patent, it says, in one embodiment, the frame or extension or other portions of the wireless earpieces may include sensors for sensing pulse, blood oxygenation, temperature, voice characteristics, skin conduction, glucose levels, impacts, activity level, position, location, orientation, as well as any number of internal or external user biometrics. In other embodiments, the sensors may be internally positioned within the wireless earpiece. For example, the sensors may represent metallic contacts, optical interfaces, or micro delivery systems for receiving and delivering information. Small electrical charges may be passed through the sensors to analyze the biometrics of the user, including pulse, skin conductivity, blood analysis, sweat levels, band, and so forth. Sensors may also be utilized to sense or provide small electrical current, which may be useful for alerting the user, stimulating blood flow, alleviating nausea, and so forth. So what I'm trying to get at is these electrodes pass current in order for them to sense what's going on around them. Is it in your left ear? Is it in your right ear? Is it halfway out? Is it inserted all the way? Do we need to turn up the sound? Do we modify the noise cancellation based on the orientation of the earphone? Which one do we turn on? All of those things that create a seamless user experience provide the reason to put these things on the device. And it doesn't stop there. Beats by Dre. You have this kind of headphone, which might be familiar to some of you, the Beats Tour. You have this kind of headphone, the sports headphone, where there are electrodes in the ear band that go around the back of the ear. Bear that in mind, because we will look at patents that look at nerve stimulation around the ear. Hopefully today, if we have time. They come in a wireless form too. And they come in around the neck form too. And you have
the oh so popular studio version that have electrodes all over the place. They have electrodes in the cushion that go around the entire ear. They have electrodes that go over top of the ear. All of these little squares are electrodes for proximity sensing to understand the orientation of the headphone. Don't forget that they can be invisible. And what I want to show you is that the electric fields that we just talked about, right? They literally talk about these in these patents. This one in particular, it shows you that these conductive structures talk to each other and generate electric fields to understand what's going on. That's how they work. Capacitive sensors. Capacitive sensor readings to understand what the orientation is, how far it's in your ear, all of those things that create a better user experience. Sensors may also be utilized to sense or provide small electrical current, which may be useful for alerting a user, stimulating blood flow, alleviating nausea, and so forth. I'm going to show you these real quick before we go back to the watches. System, apparatus, and method for providing non-transcranial electrotherapy. And what you see here is a set of headphones that have electrodes that are providing transcranial therapy. And we will look at what transcranial type therapy does, and we will reference these again. And we will also look at work done by MIT that talks about using a very small amount of electrodes, like 4, to be able to steer electric fields in the brain to target deep brain regions like the hippocampus to stimulate the brain, to do things that are similar to what putting probes in the brain for deep brain stimulation for epilepsy treatment can do. We will look at that as time goes on when we start looking at brain manipulation with these kinds of technologies. And I just want to illustrate for you folks that this stuff is already deployed and your children and likely you already use it. Here's another one. Apparatus and a method for transdermal electrical stimulations of nerves to modify or induce a cognitive state. And I'll show you some of these pictures. The little dog collar headphones where the little earbuds come out of the end of the dog collar, but you wear it as a necklace. I wonder if that plastic's conductive. Guess where it rests? It rests right along the back of your neck and around the sides of your neck. Behind the ear, right around the ear, stimulation points. The point is to illustrate where these stimulation points are. And the fact that electrodes in commonly used devices are right here on your head and on your wrist, for that matter. We'll go back to the watches in a minute, but this is a little more important, I think. You can see the stimulation points that are used to modify or induce a cognitive state. Talks about using square waves in this case to send pulses of energy, different types of energy. And we'll move on before we go back to the watches. System and method for auricular peripheral nerve stimulation. Electrodes, in this case, they've got little spikes in them because this is a proprietary patent. But again, look at where the stimulation points are on the ear. If you have an over-the-ear headphone, all of those places can be touched. If you have an in-the-ear, an earbud, you still have areas in here that can be touched and manipulated. And I'll show you a picture of the nerve centers in the ear in a moment. This is another one. It's the same thing, but a different kind of patent. Nerve field stimulation, auricular peripheral nerve field stimulation. Treating diseases using the auricular peripheral nerve stimulation. We're not going to read this, but what I'm getting at is that
they can interact with your nerves that are in your ear and treat diseases, which means it's potentially medically interactive. It's a medical device. And we have a method for treating various neurological disorders using synchronized nerve activation. And we are going to spend time on this patent too when we start looking at the antennas and we start looking at nervous system manipulation, because when a phone is in your pocket, when a phone is on your hip, when a phone is in your bra, when a phone is up to your head, you are putting it near nerves. And in this case, nerve points are illustrated in these pictures everywhere. And what I want to show you is that there are centers in the ear that they talk about in this patent that open up access points to nerves. And they're all here in the ear. So, I will show you, here's another one, ear stimulation with neural feedback sensing. And then we'll go back to our scheduled discussion. Stimulators in the ear, around the outside of the ear. They talk about this being a vibratory using mechano receptors, but they also talk about using other forms. They just use the vibratory as the example in the patent. But they talk about using magnetic fields and others in this patent as well. But I'm just illustrating for you how open the ear is with respect to access to the nervous system, because there's all kinds of medical patents that talk about being able to change and modulate and manipulate your brain and your body by accessing your ear. Neural stimulation device in a set of headphones, folks. Electrodes, electrodes, electrodes. Ear canal insert, electrodes, sensors. Should we go back and look at the Apple patents again? Electrodes, electrodes in the ear, by the ear. This goes down in front of the ear. These go around the ear. Electrodes around the ear, behind the ear. And you've got the studios, which are super popular, which have electrodes all around the ear and all along the face of the ear. And this can be played like a freaking piano, man. So I'll show you the ear nerves, and then we'll go back to the watches. Nerves in ear. And we'll look at the images and we'll find one that shows us. Here you go. The auricular branch of the vagus nerve, the great auricular nerve, lesser occipital nerve, auricular temporal nerve, the auricular peripheral nerve field stimulation. Are we seeing the correlation here? Transdermal electrical stimulation of nerves to modify cognitive state. And in this one, there were points at and around and behind the ear, if we can find them again. Case in point is another example here on this patent. There's more of them on and around the ear. Stimulation of the ear. All of these are different nerves that are associated. This is non-transcranial electrotherapy.
muscles and nerves, etc., etc. Auricular peripheral nerve field stimulation. So the vagus nerve, the auricular branch of the vagus nerve, and you can basically access the auricular components of the auricular nerve anywhere around the ear. This is just the ear and the earlobe, not behind the ear. So keep that in mind when you are looking at Beats by Dre. Bose has the same thing. These are Bose. This is a set of Bose headphones, patent by Bose Corporation, capacitive sensor technology, standard Bose headphone. And their electrodes, these are conductive traces, which are the same thing. These are electrical paths that generate electric fields, conductive traces that are built into their headphones. So it's not just Apple. Here's the dog collar thing I'm telling you about. Many different brands. I haven't found where they say that this piece is conductive, but it wouldn't surprise me. But I can't say with certainty that I found that. Here's the wireless earbuds version. It doesn't stop with these two companies. These are just examples that I happened to find that were relatively easy to correlate because I'm familiar with the brands and they were interesting to me to research. Bose talks about active unipolar dry electrodes, open ear wireless headset, and brain computer interface. So electrodes that can function as a brain computer interface. So all of these headphones have capacitive technology, capacitive technology, capacitive sensors. Headphone with orientation sensors. These are electrodes that generate electric fields to understand what this device is doing in three-dimensional space using capacitive sensor technology. Same thing here. The electrodes are trying to understand the orientation on the body against the skin. That's how they're written in the patents. They emit electric fields that can potentially be used to stimulate your nervous system. Don't forget these good old trusties. And I say all of this to you for this purpose right here, is that you have an EEG monitor with capacitive electrodes and a method of monitoring brainwaves. I thought I fixed this. I did. Good. So this patent talks about using these capacitive electrodes to monitor your brain. Invention, the first aspect, provides an EEG monitor for continuously monitoring your brain waves using capacitive coupling to an ear canal of a user. At least 2 capacitive electrodes adapted for recording a signal. So picking up your brain waves using the electric fields and these capacitive sensors. So the question is, does Apple, being the most valued company in the stock market, the first $2 trillion company, do you think that they potentially possess the software that's able to do something like pull your brainwaves? If they don't, no one does. Just my opinion. But these are capacitive sensing electrodes, may extend across both ear portions and the stalk portion of the housing. There may be an array of multiple capacitive sensor electrodes overlapping by the surface of the housing in both ear portion and the stalk portion. Electrodes may be formed on the outer surface of the housing, may be formed or placed near an inner surface of the housing wall, may be embedded within the polymer or other material forming the housing. Configurations in which electrodes are covered by a housing wall structure or cosmetic dielectric coatings. Cosmetic dielectric coatings, the shiny stuff, may help hide the electrodes from view by a user. There may be multiple electrodes in the ear portion, and these electrodes may run around the perimeter of the ear portion. So let's just finish up the earpiece because we're almost done with the earpiece, and we'll go back to the watch, and we'll go back to being able to extract your brainwaves out of your body. Don't worry, it gets creepier. Wireless earbuds will record your EEG and send brainwave data to your phone. This is a startup company, but nonetheless provides the example that this technology is here. Talks about EEG recordings typically requiring 256 electrodes to the scalp and face. This is the stuff they show you on the Science Channel to make it seem completely out of reach. Couldn't happen to something you're buying for your children so they can enjoy music, or listen to Zoom privately while they're going to school out of fear over getting something that's not as lethal as even the common flu. Never mind while it's providing literal programming, potentially providing literal programming through the nervous system. The Aware tracks steps, heart rate, and calories burned. Well, so do all the health devices, health apps associated with things like headphones and watches. The earbuds in this case are 3D printed to fit each user's ear. And it uses and processes raw brainwave data, uses graphic display to show the user's changes in stress and relaxation level in real time. And what I want to show you is that this thing talks about single channel. No, it's this next one. EEG devices will read your brainwaves and change your world. They are able to read your brainwaves using one electrode, a single channel electrode. Philip Lowe, mathematician and biology student doing experiments with birds at the University of Chicago in 2007, talked about the problems he and other researchers faced trying to figure out if birds dreamed. There was evidence, he said, that birds replayed songs in their heads while they slept, but the results given by EEG devices were wildly unreliable. Lowe set out to invent a new kind of EEG that would revolutionize mind reading, a field that he's once again on the cusp of fundamentally changing. In 2009, he succeeded on his first invention with math so simple it can fit on a page. The algorithms he invented allowed researchers to collect electrical signals from bird brains using just one electrode, a technique now called single channel EEG. One electrode collecting brainwaves. So he was allowed to graduate from the University of San Diego with a one-page thesis, the shortest in the history of the university, and a 350-page appendix. Talks about wanting to build a single-channel device for humans. And he was so young that the investors basically shut the doors in his face. Blah, blah, blah. He started a single-channel EEG device for human called the iBrain, ironically just before the iPhone came out, and a small company called Neurovigil. He gained fame when it was realized that it was revealed that he was assisting Stephen Hawking. You remember Stephen Hawking having a little translator on his wheelchair where he could think and it would talk, or he would type and it would talk? Yeah, this guy helped him, the one that invented a single-channel EEG. It doesn't stop there. MIT's Media Lab, real-time smartphone-based sleep staging using one-channel EEG and machine learning. These are just examples, folks. One channel to understand what's going on with your dreaming, where you are in your sleep state. That's all they're disclosing with the software that they built for this. But I want to show you Media Labs, because they're way into dream incubation, understanding what you're actually doing when you dream, biosensing sleep mask for researching all these sensors on and around your face, accessing your nerves. And what I'm getting at is that schools like MIT, with these types of programs, are developing the software that can then be sold to companies that make or are valued at $2 trillion, like Apple or Google.
when the software is able to say, okay, we can use 4 electrodes that are spaced this far apart, and we can understand with this resolution what's going on in the brain.
Wearable reasoner, enhancing human rationality through a wearable device with an AI assistant through something like glasses, again, right around your face and your head. Wearable wisdom, audio-based system for meditating. This one was interesting. Opportunities and challenges for integrating living microorganisms in a human-computer interaction, whereby they're using microorganisms as circuits in your body. Kind of creepy. We'll get there at some point when we go back to genetic modification. But I want to show you what else they're doing with sleep, interfacing with dreams. Vast majority of our technologies are built for a waking state. This thing is measuring the muscle activity in the neck, using electrodes on the face again to talk with AI and get feedback from AI. This is the real-time smartphone-based sleeping channel, one channel EEG machine learning technology. One channel, one electrode, measuring your brain through complex algorithms and machine learning to understand as completely as possible what's going on in your sleep. Deep neurofeedback. Interesting. Looking at your brain. And then this is called Insight, deep neurofeedback. We'll probably come back to this site one day when I'm super busy during the week and haven't prepped, and we'll just go through some of this stuff because this is really interesting. This is MIT's Media Lab if you want to look at this. Pretty interesting stuff that they're into. What else is in here? I think that's it. So let's go back to the watches because I really want to show you this other stuff. So we looked at this watch. It's got electrodes. It's got light. It can measure your heart rate, measure your skin response. It can measure a whole bunch of other things as well. And on this page, on this site, humaninternet.org, it also talks about the light field camera. And I want to show you that this light field camera biometrically authenticates you based on your bone and your other tissue structures, including your veins and cartilage, that it scans and identifies your unique signatures in your skin and the components underneath your skin using light. Here's an example. And it authenticates you based on your unique biologic structures. And when we start looking at how light can stimulate nerves and how magnets and magnetic fields can stimulate nerves, you will see how something like a watch is also potentially a medical device, because how do you think these watches charge? These watches charge with antenna coils that magnetically couple to a charging station, and power is transferred wirelessly. And we will get to that likely on the next show, because they are able to do some very interesting things with magnetic fields that come off of these antennas, that when you put them in a form factor like a watch, right? When you put them in a form factor like a watch, the antennas have to do many things like talk using Bluetooth, potentially talk using cell networks. They have to be able to provide a source to receive and or transmit power. They have to provide an ability to pay for things if you wanted to tap your watch to a pay pass. In order to get a form factor as sleek and as sexy as a Hermes Apple smartwatch, those antennas need to be scalable and tunable and need to be able to perform many different functions using the same antenna, which means that their power can be controlled, their frequency can be controlled, their modulation can be controlled. And when we look at what that can do to your biology, hopefully when you're done, you will say, what the fill in the blank.
This is why Google merged, in my view, with Fitbit, why Big Pharma is merging with Big Tech, because these are the modern ways in which therapy, as well as mental and physical health, will be evaluated. Telemedicine. Telemedicine is more than just, I'm going to talk to my doctor on Skype. Folks, it's so much more. So let's move on. Not to just pick on Apple, right? And or Fitbit, because that's the Google product now. You also have Samsung, wearable device. I think it's their Galaxy, I think is their name. But what I want to show you here is it's all the same stuff. And when you look at all of their patents collectively, one patent set talks about the configuration and the mechanical construct, and other patents talk about more of what they can do. And they leave out a lot of the mechanics. They just talk about what they can do. And this one talks about a sensor or many sensors integrated into a watch. And it says that it may include biometric sensors that detect a biological signal when it's in proximity or in contact with part of a user's body. Biological information may include at least one of, for example, just examples, pulse, heartbeat, oxygen saturation, blood flow. Biometric sensor may collect raw data for measuring a user's blood pressure, blood flow, heart rate variability, temperature, respiration rate, oxygen saturation, cardiorespiratory sound detection. They can hear your breathing through your watch. How does that work? Bone conduction, maybe? Blood sugar, waist, height, weight, body fat, caloric consumption, brainwave, literally right here in this damn patent. Voice, skin resistance, electromyogram, electrocardiogram, walk, ultrasonic image, sleep state, look, meaning your face, pupil dilation, and eye blinking. How much did you pay for your smartwatch? It might make going to the doctor a lot cheaper if this stuff is ever brought into some type of control. If this technology is brought under control, whereby we have a say in how it's used. Right now we don't. We just sign away terms of service so that we can use the damn thing. Oh, I want to get healthy. Make sure my heart rate's good. Make sure I'm sleeping good. Okay. Click acknowledge, accept. But the terms of service are 400 pages. Doesn't matter. I need to turn this damn thing on and program it and set it up to my phone. I need to use it. I want to see my heartbeat on the watch. The biometric sensor may collect primary biological signals, information for measuring a user's blood pressure, blood flow, heart rate variability, temperature, respiration rate, oxygen saturation, cardiorespiratory sound detection, blood sugar, waist, height, weight, body fat, caloric consumption, brainwaves, voice, skin resistance, electromyogram, and on and on and on. It might include a muscle measuring sensor that senses the movement of the wrist muscle, relaxation, contraction, twist, raising of the hand, or lowering of the hand. Embodiments of the wearable device in response to acquisition of biologic information may control function of an external device. So now you have a smart home, Internet of Things kind of thing. It might, in response to whatever information it's extracting out of your body, manipulate the TV or the air conditioner or a smartphone, right? You're falling asleep, it knows that you're asleep. Maybe it turns off the TV or turns down the volume. It notices that you're getting warm, you're perspiring, you're sweating, your heartbeat goes up. Maybe it turns on the air conditioner. That kind of stuff. All for convenience. Let's continue. Body-based monitoring of brain electrical activity. Body-based monitoring of brain electrical activity. Freer logic, patented back in 2008.
So here's the patent. We'll go back to the notes. Apparatus and a method for monitoring electrical activity within the brain of a person, your brain waves, employing electrodes or other sensors connected or placed nearby portions of the body below the head to develop raw signals. So they're saying here it can be electrodes or other sensors placed nearby. Why am I emphasizing that? Because you have things that are called capacitive sensors and capacitive measurements of electromagnetic signals having a biologic origin. We're not going to read this patent, but it's from some German university, and it's simply an example that there are sensors that don't have to make physical contact with your body in order to pull the electromagnetic signatures out of your body. Here's another one. It's a no-contact biopotential sensor. And there's no real cool pictures here, but what it talks about is a capacitive sensor, right? Including a sensing plate and an amplifier and a switching circuit that capacitively couples to the body's surface. Capacitive sensors. Capacitive electrodes reading your brain waves. Capacitive sensors in these devices. Electrodes, earbud device with capacitive sensors. Capacitive sensors, generating electric fields. That's how they work. So, capacitive measurements of electromagnetic signals having a biologic origin. Same thing. This patent discusses a no-contact sensor that's using a capacitive electric field that uses the electric field itself to make contact with the body. And here's why I show you that, because you have a patent from Google that talks about using a proximity sensor and a side detection sensor for an electronic device in order to understand if the device is in your hand, on a table, upside down, right side up, whatever. And it has pictures in here of a loop antenna that also functions as a near field communication antenna that can be tuned to be a proximity sensor that makes contact or uses you as part of the circuit, where you become the grounding point in the circuit. And I will show you that in this patent before we go back to being able to read your brain waves. An electronic device includes a housing enclosing a motion sensor and a capacitive proximity sensor, a capacitive sensor on a side of the electronic device. A second capacitive sensor, proximity sensor, on a second planar side of the electronic device within the housing is monitored for determining the difference between the signal change of the first and the second sensor. And you have coil antennas that function as a near field communication. The same thing you're going to use for any near field communication is also being used as a capacitive sensor for proximity detection purposes. And what I want to show you here and we'll look at this in more detail when we go back to antennas. The open loop conductor may be employed in another embodiment in combination with the loop antenna. The open loop conductor is also an open loop and is adjacent to the open loop conductor, may also be grounded to the chassis of the electronic device, thus coupling a user of the electronic device to battery ground in order to have the capacitive sensor function properly. The open loop conductor may also be grounded to the chassis of the electronic device, thereby coupling the user, the human, to the electronic device, to the battery ground, in order to have the capacitive sensor function properly. This methodology is a self-capacitance scheme,
which is different from mutual capacitance. In self-capacitance scheme, the device has one capacitance plate and the user's body constitutes the other plate when the user is brought into proximity within the device, nearby the device. Because the user stands on earth ground and the device is powered by a battery ground, a means to couple the two types of ground is needed, which is accomplished as described above, mainly when the user comes into proximity with the sensor plate and the user also comes into proximity with the ground plate shown in the description, in this case in figure 6. So we're going to look at what this means when we start looking at body area communications, which was patented by MIT back in '96. And functions very well with near field communication technologies that have been around in phones since 2006. And we'll likely get there on Sunday, Monday. But let's go back to this patent that talks about reading your brain waves out of your body. So electrodes or sensors nearby portions of the body. So I just showed you where a cell phone and or headphones can be those nearby sensors through the use of capacitive fields to connect the body to the device, whereby you become part of the circuit so that your information can potentially, your bioelectric information can be read. Notice that it's on the, it could be on the leg, it can be on the wrist, it can be on the arm. I'll show you the arm, it's in here. Here's the example of the arm. And when you go to Freer's website, they literally have a device that talks about being able to help people with ADHD or ADD. And they show, I think, a child with this on their arm. I will show you. So, yeah, right here. So this thing is literally reading what's going on in her brain because it's with it on her skin on her shoulder. Same thing here. This is just a light to illustrate there's a connection to the brain. This isn't a headphone. It's not a headset. It's just this device that's interacting with the brain. And we're going to get into the wireless side of this too, where they can do this at distance. They don't even need to make contact with your skin to be able to read what's going on in your brain. No contact, headrest, neurobio-monitor. We will get there likely on Sunday to show that this stuff is possible at distance. But let's go back to where we were. Circuit diagram, electrodes or antennas that take the bioelectric information, they filter out what they don't want. It's actually down here. And then they're able to actually understand what's going on in the brain. This is a better example. Electrodes or antennas brought through, they're pulling this information out of your heart rate. They're taking your heart rate, the electrical information, your ECG, EKG, and they're filtering all the stuff out they don't want. And what's left, they can understand your brainwave signals out of that. And it explains it in some detail. The method includes positioning a sensor at least nearby, approximate to a portion of the user's skin of the body below the head to develop raw signals and filtering the raw signals to produce analysis signals, including frequency components relevant to brainwaves, EEG, brain electrical activity, while attenuating or getting rid of unrelated frequency components. It's provided for monitoring a mental state of a person. Raw signals produce at least one bandpass filtered state, indicating a signal representative of a raw signal magnitude within a predetermined frequency range. They can measure many of them at the same time. Method is provided for monitoring the level of attention of a person having a body, including a head. to develop signals and analyzing the signals to provide an indication of the person's level of attention by isolating frequency components relevant to the brain electrical activity indicative of the person's level of attention while attenuating unrelated frequencies. The sensor is at least nearby a portion of the skin, portion of the body, with the exception of the head, and a programmed computing device receives signals from the amplifier. The unit and the computing device function together to isolate and analyze frequency components of the signal relevant to brain electrical activity while attenuating unrelated frequency components. One topology embodying the invention employs a body-attached unit in communication with a separate analysis computer. Another version of the invention employs a single self-contained unit attached to the body below the head, performing all data collection, signal processing, and analysis functions. What does this mean? What this means is that they have the software for a standalone device, or they have the software that can do the computation over the internet. That's what this means. This is why it applies, in my view, to things like smartwatches and headphones, who have the same type of sensors. Electrodes that either make direct contact or use electric fields, or antennas for that matter, that use magnetic fields or electric fields to extract things like your heart rate. Because if they can do the computation in the cloud, then a company like this could potentially sell the software, or it can be stolen through intellectual property theft and then deployed by anyone. Talks about the different brainwave frequency bands. Delta band up to 3 hertz, theta band 4 hertz to 8 hertz, alpha band 8 hertz to 12 hertz, beta band 12 hertz to 30 hertz, and gamma band 26 to 100 hertz approximately. Although these different brainwave signals are produced simultaneously and in combination, the frequency band within which signals are dominant, strongest at any point in time is an indication of the state of consciousness of a person, or of the physiological state of the person. So when we go back to the single channel EEG analysis, and this idea of software learning, machine learning, data analytics, building a profile, sampling over many different sessions over extended periods of time, being able to understand with a minimal amount of contact what's going on with all of these frequency bands at the same time, you then start being able to visualize what the decomposition of somebody's thoughts are, whereby what they're feeling, what they're thinking and or saying, anything going on with mental computation is going to be a combination of these various frequency bands, of the various brainwaves, alpha, beta, theta, gamma, delta. And based on the recipe, the right mixture of these different brainwave ranges, you then begin to decode what's going on in the brain. And so through repetitive sampling, you can then build a profile of what a brainwave signature, what a brain signature is when somebody says the word yes, or somebody says the word no, or somebody says the word hello. And why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you all of this because then we get to the technology that does something like this, a dual brainwave, no contact monitor that has a personal brainwave monitor for concurrent brain monitoring and brain communication, whereby your thoughts can be exchanged with somebody else over the internet with something like a watch. Because the algorithms and the computation and the data storage and the unique brainwave signatures, your biometric information can be stored and cataloged, whereby when you think something, when you want to say something, when you feel something, it has a unique brainwave signature that is a combination of alpha, beta, theta, delta, and gamma waves that then go and they're stored in a database so that it becomes a unique signature, so that when these electrodes or these antennas are able to read that corresponding signature, brainwave signature. It accesses the database. It verifies that that's what it is that you're thinking, feeling, wanting to say. And then it exchanges it with somebody else's profile in the cloud. It converts your brainwave signature to their corresponding brainwave signature, and then it's transmitted back over the internet through their watch in their own unique frequency, their own unique signature, so that when they interpret it, they understand what you're saying. Because if you were to provide a direct sample of your brainwaves to somebody else, it wouldn't make sense. So a database in the cloud needs to be made and profiles need to be configured so that when you say hello, your unique brainwave signature can be validated in the cloud, and it's then converted to whoever you're trying to communicate with into whatever their unique brainwave signature is in the cloud that says hello. And then that sequence is sent over the internet and injected into the nervous system through the watch or through an antenna, through magnetic stimulation in the right frequency, in the right range of pulses, if you will, so that when it's sent to their brain, they understand what you're saying. And I'll show you what that looks like. Communication system, including brainwave analysis and or use of brainwave activity. And what this talks about is a system capable of identifying particular nodes in an individual's brain, the firings of which affect characteristics such as appetite, hunger, thirst, or communication. Nodes that are utilized to communicate certain words such as yes or no, or phrases such as I don't know, I'm not sure, or numbers such as 1, 2, 10, 100, and the like, thought processes, depression, and the like. So we have words, statements, phrases, ideas, thoughts, sensations such as appetite, hunger, and thirst, and we have emotions such as depression. And what it talks about in this patent is a unique signature, a unique brainwave signature between person A and person B, whereby yes looks like this to one person and looks like this to somebody else, and no looks like this to one person and is registered as this when it's read from somebody else. So the point I'm trying to make here is that a database needs to be stored so that when somebody wants to say no telepathically to somebody else, both individuals' brainwave signatures that correspond with the word no need to be stored in the cloud, and a computer translator does the exchange. And then in this case, the signals are injected back into the nervous system of the person wearing the watch. Through the translation process, through a computer translator in the cloud. So let's go back to contact electrodes. We have 5 minutes left. We'll go back to contact electrodes or nearby proximity electrodes, being able to extract your heartbeat, and then from your heartbeat, being able to extract your brainwaves. Frequency components relevant to the brain electrical activity in general are of interest, particularly when frequency components include delta waves. Signal components corresponding to a person's heartbeat, approximately 1 to 2 hertz, are unrelated components to a particular concern. Unrelated frequency components corresponding to the electrical activity of a person's heart are particularly high in magnitude when sensors are connected to portions of the body below the head. The invention may be embodied in systems in which signal components and the raw signals resulting from electrical activity of the person's heart are actively attenuated. In an ideal case, signal components resulting from electrical activity of a person's heart are entirely canceled in what may be referred to and known as active cancellation. An alternative to heart rate signal extractor
and summing junction, the topology of figure 2, may be employed to provide similar functionality. More particularly, figure 2, a filter may be an adaptive digital signal processing filter programmed to attenuate signal components resulting from electrical activity of a person's heart, as well as other signals such as coupled 50 hertz or 60 hertz AC power line signals. So those invisible electric fields that are in your house or in your office space, this device is able to filter those electric fields out and literally pull out nanovolts of energy that are your brain waves from your body. It's not even something that's placed on your head. Signal components resulting from electrical activity of a person's heart can be used for at least 2 other purposes in the embodiments of the invention. One such other purpose is to ensure a body attachment device and in particular sensors are in fact attached to or in contact with or otherwise functionally nearby the body of a person. If you don't have a heartbeat, then it shouldn't be measuring, right? That's what this is saying. For convenience, collectively referred to in this paragraph as a presence. Ensuring such presence can be employed to ensure that the sensed signal components within the brainwave frequency band are in fact representative of brainwaves and are not the result of stray signals coupled from environmental sources. In other words, to validate that an EEG, a brainwave signal, is actually being collected. Ensuring such a presence can also be employed to conserve battery life by entering low power standby mode when the absence of a signal component results from electrical activity of a person's heart indicates that there is no one there. Another such purpose is to combine indications resulting from brain electrical activity and from electrical activity of a person's heart for a more comprehensive analysis and indication of a person's cognitive and physiological state. Embodiments of the invention thus provide the foundation for a dual technology approach, whereby brainwaves and your heartbeat, your heart rate information can be measured for more comprehensive physiological state monitoring. Even so, it's been discovered that sensors attached to portions of the body below the head develop raw signals, which when amplified and filtered, as described in this patent, provide useful analysis signals for monitoring the electrical activity within the brain. Particularly useful and effective are embodiments wherein raw signals from the electrodes or sensors are filtered and analyzed to determine the magnitude of the brainwave activity within particular frequency bands of interest, which are indicative of a level of attention. I've also explained to you how that the combination of the different frequency bands also provide things like what you're thinking, what you're seeing, what you're imagining, what you want to say. And that's how they can get to the point where they're exchanging thought through a watch. This patent was in 2008. It took many years after that for machine learning, software, algorithms, et cetera, to catch up or get better, whereby more specific information can be extracted and inserted into the brain. Stated in other words, it's been discovered that attentional brainwave monitors, which include electrodes intended to be attached to the head, are also effective when the electrodes or other sensors such as no contact biosensors, which are those sensors we looked at a minute ago, are attached, for example, to the arms. And these sensors are the capacitive measurement sensors for electromagnetic signals having a biologic origin, no contact biopotential sensors. Very, very common, very abundant in our environment. They exist in things like near field communication chips that exist in every modern communication device deployed today. And as we move into cryptocurrency and a cashless society, these things will become absolutely necessary for society to be able to function. And with that, good night.